Hey everybody, and welcome. And sorry for being away for so long. It's, I think, been 2 months since we've done an episode of The Higher Estate, mainly because myself and Al have been really sick. I was sick from June till last month, with maybe in between that, like a month or two without having to cough. Remember, I was coughing constantly, doing the clearing the throat, the whole thing. Honestly, I think I have emphysema or I'm dying. Okay, no, that was a joke. But that's my paranoid self talking.
You sound like an old Jewish lady.
Yeah, right. Well, I kind of am. I kind of am. I am old now, and I am Jewish, so I've got two of those criteria filled. So I want to welcome everybody back to The Higher Estate, and we are actually gonna sound off with a huge bang because we have an amazing, awesome human that's here today, and I'm really happy to have Vince Luciani. Did I get it right?
You got it, yeah.
Beautiful.
Nobody usually gets that right.
Because you know what happens when you're awesome.
Yeah.
See, I read all your mindful training, and now I'm just awesome. I don't need that anymore. No, I'm kidding. So just before we get started and we talk to Vince, let's talk about what's been happening in the cannabis world for a little bit. I think the last time I was on was probably just around legalization. Actually, Al,
Yeah.
the last time I was on was from Gunjanistas.
That was on Legalization Day.
Was it really?
Yes, it was. Yes, sir.
October?
We sat there. You had to leave several times. You know, I remember that.
Oh, there was one time I was on after that.
We did one more recording after that, and you should put something in the swear jar.
I should. Did I swear?
Yeah.
Oh, shoot.
Tyler, your mic is really low. Just so you know.
I'll just disclaim, Mom. Hopefully, again, my mother hates when I swear, and she hates when her friends listen to the show and then they say sorry. I'm going to give you a 4 out of 5 because you swore too much. So
I also have a Jewish mother, and she hates that stuff. She's been calling cannabis that stuff all my life. She's getting used to it now, but she calls it that stuff.
I got my mother is now using cannabis. My mother-in-law's using. Everybody's using cannabis because it's the paradigm shift. It's the conscious shift of the medical world moving away from this. Sorry, the ancient patriarchal. I say this all the time. Take this pill, go home, and if it doesn't work, fucking
Call us in 48 hours.
Guys, I'm going to be out of $5 really quick. Anybody there's some dimes in there. Right, call us in 48 hours. So what's been happening I don't remember what we were talking about, Al, but anyways, I'm going to go back to what I was saying. So what's happening in the cannabis world since legalization? Well, I think the most noticeable thing that's happened here in our city, in Hamilton, and is the closure of most of the dispensaries. And I know I was talking with Al earlier on and talking with some friends who had dispensaries that it's quite an unfortunate shift from that perspective. I'll tell you, like 3 months ago, 3 months ago, 3 months ago was legalization. So it was even before that. It was probably in September when I met with one of the ward NPP, right? That's the met with the MPP, and they were actually super happy that we had dispensaries in our city. I was actually taken quite aback by it because, from my perspective, when the Doug Ford government got in, they were going to allow for proper democracy and allow for privatization of the cannabis shops. So I went in and spoke to one of the the head guy, MPP. I won't mention his name. And he was super happy that we already had dispensaries, and he's like, it doesn't really matter if we have these legalized places because we're happy. Nobody complains about them. They pay their taxes, blah, blah, blah. And then that woman got up there and said, well, I made $85,000 today and didn't pay any tax. I think that changed a lot of people's opinions.
Yes.
When she did that. But in the meantime, so they closed these things. Now, as a physician, how do I feel about that, right? So as a physician who promotes health and wellness, from one perspective, I'm saying, well, we're now following, we have to follow the, law. But what if law is unjust? What do we do about that? And then what do we do about quality assurance? These places are not regulated. My whole idea, which is why I sat on that while I was that expert witness there for Clint in his case there in Toronto, for the purpose of having a dispensary, my whole goal was so that we can regulate dispensaries instead of throwing them out. In the meantime, they've closed all of them. They find these guys, and a lot of people are left without medicine. Am I wrong by saying that, Al?
Not at all. You know how I feel about it, and I want to say, and I've asked if I can say this: Natural Green Healing on King Street is open for medical patients.
Sorry, you asked me that?
No, I'm telling you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you clearly didn't tell me that. I had no idea. Okay, because most of them
are closed. A lot, and they are going after the rec guys. They've really punched Georgia Peach in the head. There are a few dispensaries that are running as they should be medically, and are hoping that trying to choose my words right. They're hoping that we can kind of convince somebody that the model that we are adhering to is what the courts have said has to be.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that we're in the first iteration. Actually, we're in the second iteration, and it's going to just keep developing. So eventually we're going to get there. Right now, from a medical perspective, I'm happy that we have LPs that are doing it. The problem is all this taxation that's coming on, which will eventually at the end lead me to, Synergy's now partnered with BuyWell and BuyWell Care. So we have cannabis coverage for patients who want cannabis, and it's fully, and it's a non, there's,
really?
And there's
we need to talk more about that then.
And there's no barriers, so it's a guaranteed issued product. You can just go on buywell.com and find it now. You can just put in the calculator, see how much you're going to save. Anyway, it's a great opportunity for the whole community and for the medical community. So I think there's some positives and there's some negatives to that. We've also had the Ontario lottery, which was the opposite. I mean, I guess one could say that's like true democracy. The problem is it was 25 random fucking people, okay, who were chosen, and that's when all shit broke loose. Mom, I'm gonna stop from now on. That's when it all that's when it all stopped. When greed took over. I knew one of the people who won this lottery. And so I called him up. I said, hey, anything you need help with, I'm there to help. He goes, oh, no, we already have a lawyer. We're trying to sell the thing. We're selling these licenses for $5 million. Yeah. We're partnering with these everybody's trying to make some money. And that's when I think the compassion and the purpose of having the medical cannabis in the first place, sort of in my mind, I lost a little bit of respect. But at the same time, on the flip side of that, it did allow for people to, I'm not against capitalism at all. I think it's okay for people to make a fair living as long as there's a fair exchange
this hasn't been fair at all, Ira. They have completely removed any way for a medical patient to walk into a storefront and say, hey, what they're not even allowed when they open OCS in Ontario. They're not even allowed to say, this is what I thought about it. This is what I thought about this strain, and I think it might work for what you got. That's what I get when I go into a dispensary from a bud tender. They know what they're talking about. They've tried the strains. They've talked to other patients, and you can't.
But still, Al, still following, we still have to follow law. The dispensary at the end of the day was still illegal. There is a way to do it properly. And I think, eventually we're going to get there. They are allowing stores, basically this stupid 25-person, people who won this lottery, which is super ridiculous. It just gives them a year advantage. At the end of the day, everybody who wants to be in it, I think will have that opportunity. I hope they will. And if not, there'll be a lot of constitutional challenges. And in Canada,
there already is.
Canada does.
There already is a few. There are already a few challenges already. Yep.
Yeah, of course there are. And where Canada, where the government loses every time is in the court of law. So, I mean, I think our judicial system will hold up, and eventually we'll be able to get through that. Okay. So what else is happening? This is interesting. So most of you probably don't know this. The Niagara Medical Association, probably shouldn't be saying this, but whatever, because I'm a doctor. The Niagara Medical, but I don't. I got the coat to prove it. I may not have the license, but I know. I'm kidding. Can you cut that out? I'm just kidding. Now we're live.
We're live, dude.
No. Yeah, I'll say that's right. Yeah, so the Niagara Medical Association put out their little statement that was very anti-cannabis. Oh, and so I got a call from an LP, and I'll tell you, I'm actually quite impressed with Tilray. Tilray's done some really good education, but I got a call from Tilray, which is a licensed producer, and these guys called me up and said, listen, the Medical Association of the Niagara Medical Association has put out this negative stance on cannabis for medical purposes. Would you mind going? But they're willing to listen to somebody talk to them. Would you, Ira, mind going to give this lecture? And, it is a huge responsibility for me to do that, but I've been doing it for almost a decade now. And so, my goal isn't to convince them. I'm not there to convince them. I'm there to show them the evidence. And hopefully, the problem is people have what I call confirmation bias. Confirmation bias, our own thought process and our own beliefs and values that we were brought up with, that's sort of how we see the world. And I'm sure you go into this stuff a lot. I really want to know why legacy is upside down. We're going to talk about that.
I was told to shut up.
You were told. Right. Yeah. No, good. Feel free to interrupt. I talk a lot. So it is a lot of responsibility, but I feel like I'm going to go. I'm going to provide them the evidence. They can make their own decision. But they need to use reason, logic, and evidence-based principles. If we continue to live in an age that isn't reason, which is our old civilization, where we have copper mines, then certainly. But we're far beyond the copper age or the whatever came before that or after that. I don't really fucking know, but it sounded good to say. Bronze Age, right? It sounded really good to say at that moment, so I thought I'd throw it in there to sound smart. Okay, so let's move on from that. We have LPs that are trying to hit every market. Of course, we have, and I think they're forgetting a little bit about the medical market. The LPs for the first quarter here seem to get lost in in recreation and in the lifestyle market, forgetting that the medical market in Canada is not going anywhere. Not only is it not going anywhere, I think, and Tyler, correct me, what's happened since since legalization?
A lot of people that were uncomfortable with the idea of medical cannabis before, but now that it's countrywide legal, are opening up to it and coming in for consultations. Referrals have increased significantly.
We're about 30% higher. I think we're having a 30% increase is what Ontario is seeing. I've heard that places like Calgary haven't, but out west is a totally different.
They had an established system for years and years and years in Vancouver and in BC and that. So, with the compassion clubs and everything like that.
Yeah, for sure. So I think, what we're seeing here is the consequence of legalization, which is great from a medical perspective. People are willing to come in, and that's also great. I sort of talked to you already a little bit about Buy Well. We'll talk about it throughout as we get into it. Don't worry, I have a great intro for you. Dun, da, 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 we're getting to you. I've been away for 3-4 months. I'm into it. There's a really awesome what's it called? Campaign. That's the word. I couldn't remember that word. There's an awesome campaign. Do you want to talk about that? By the way, Tyler's the co-host here, and Tyler is the Canna Care Specialist Educator here at Synergy. So
Aurora started a campaign, and they're joining together with a lot of other licensed producers to stop the taxation of medical cannabis. So I don't know if everyone knows, but prescription drugs aren't taxed in Canada. Only cannabis is. So they're working with other licensed producers to bring it forward to the government to stop the taxation of medical cannabis.
Yeah, so you can find that at
AuroraMJ.com.
Skip that part. We're going to fucking plug Aurora.
It is.
Oh, it is? I thought it's that cannabis tax ticker.
So the cannabis tax ticker is actually the amount of money that has been spent on taxation of medical cannabis within Canada since the beginning in 2002.
Right.
And it's well over $200 million.
Wow.
It's climbing every second.
That's pretty intense. I'm just going to put in this thing. You need my phone here a second. Here you go. There you go. Okay, so finally, I think and this is going to lead us into into talking to Vince today, because that's really what we want to talk about. Cannabis research. He's like, why the hell does that have anything to do with me? Oh, you'll see. You'll see my loose associations. I make connections between things that make no sense, but it's there.
Yeah,
so, since legalization, even just before it, there's been some amazing research that's starting to come out. Tilray's done the TOPS trial, and I presented that at Cannabis in BC probably 2 or 3 or back in December. But then my own trial from Cannabis Research Associates called COST, Cannabis for Opioid Substitution Therapy. It's nearly done. We're like maybe 100 patients away from hitting our target. And man, the reduction in opioids is like overwhelming. We're over 80% of patients who have been using cannabinoids have been able to reduce their opioids.
Good.
But and the research just coming out more and more and more, and people just we're going to start seeing more of that stuff come out. But that brings me to one of the things that I think Vince is going to help us with today, and I want to hear about what he does and how we can, because I think a lot of the principles that you talk about are able to fall into our category, because we have a lot of people that listen to this, not only athletes who listen to this, but we're also talking about chronic pain patients. We're talking about patients that suffer from mental health, PTSD, and general population that are stuck and and are defining themselves by their disease process. I'm a chronic pain sufferer. That's like the number, but we validate that. We're here and we're validating the chronic pain. I'm a chronic pain sufferer, but if I validate that, is that who I am? I hear you talking a lot about, is what I do who I am? Does that define me? So let me introduce you to Vince. So proud Hamiltonian.
For 3 years now. But yes.
Okay. Oh, really? Damn it! And I thought I did all this.
Do your research, Ira.
What? Listen, 3 years. Listen, it's Ira's swear jar. So proud Hamiltonian, and I'm a mess. Things are all over today. And one of your quotes, you said, "Your life and legacy are not defined by what you do," and I want to talk about that. You received your master's in coaching education from Ohio State.
Ohio University.
Ohio University. Right.
I went to school in the U.S. as well.
Nice. Whereabouts?
Lindenwood University in St. Louis.
Yeah, I've definitely heard Lindenwood.
Yeah, man.
I feel like there was something you had to say about his school.
I thought you went to Ohio State.
Yeah, there's always somebody always has something to say about Ohio State, but we are definitely not Ohio State. We're Ohio University.
Oh, that's funny. Because yesterday when I was like, oh yeah, Ohio State. He went off for 10 minutes. He's like, I don't like what are Badgers? I don't know. Buckeyes, whatever. It had to be. I was close. All right. See my sport knowledge. All right. Ticats goes there and stops.
Perfect.
You've been coaching in CFL, NCAA. You've done D1 coaching and also like mindfulness training for these guys. In 2018, you won some award, the Life Coach of the Year award, which is kind of cool. I want an award. No one gives me awards. I want an award. Nobody. They're like, we give you an award. 3 months off. You get an award for cannabis behavior. Anyway, so I want to talk about that. First, maybe just, where I want to start is the label. The label, and if we're defined by, are we defined by who we are? If I say I'm a chronic pain sufferer, like that, how do we see the world that way? How does the rest of the world look? But before we get there, tell me a little bit about yourself and what the hell legacy is doing spelled out. Take a picture of this guy's shirt. I love it. That's how I lead my life, upside down, backwards.
Yeah, me too.
So tell me, like, what's happening?
So
who are you?
I'll give you a little bit of a backstory as to why.
Yeah. How'd you get this?
Right. Yeah. So my whole life I was always an athlete. So
I
played basketball, football, track, just about everything, and I played all the way through university. So I played 5 years at Laurier, and in that time went through a really dark time. So I got diagnosed with depression, anxiety, 2 learning disabilities, ADD. You take the pills, kind of move through whatever, and then really dark time, but carried the label of being an athlete. That was really a really strong belief of mine. And then when I was done playing, I got into coaching. So I coached with the Ticats for a year, coached in the NCAA with Ohio for 2 years, and then bought into the identity to be a coach, right? So you just kind of switch the label. And then what happened was I had a really bad knee injury when I was in Ohio. So I ruptured my patella tendon. And so I had to have emergency surgery down there. And then it was right before spring break, so I had to get shipped back. So my best friend came down to get me, drove me home. And then within about 2 months, realized I didn't want to go back and coach. I just realized I didn't really belong there. And so I had to find a job. So I limped my way into a Lululemon.
I knew that. I heard that. Naz was telling me about that.
This is where it gets funny.
Yeah.
So I get hired at Lululemon. I remember she's like, "You're a guy and you want to work here?" I was like, "Yeah, for sure." So
why not?
Why not, right? So first week, my manager takes me out for coffee. She sits me down.
Sorry, how did you get to Lululemon though? You got looped in from being a coach? Like, how does one get from?
So to be completely honest, I limped my way into the Nike outlet. They weren't hiring, so I was like, you know what? Love the Lululemon boxers. I'm going to go to Lululemon.
I like them too.
And then I just got hired. And so my manager took me out for coffee, which is a common occurrence in the Lululemon culture.
Is coffee?
No, taking out employees for
all right.
Everybody's
like, then we go to Starbucks.
Nice plug, okay. Right? But she sits me down and she goes, "Vince, who are you?" And I remember I was like, "I'm a football coach." "What do you mean?" She's like, "No, that's just what you do. Who are you?" And in that moment, I actually broke down in tears. Like, I'll never forget it because I realized for 27 years of my life, I let what I did on the outside define who I was on the inside. And so since that moment, I've committed to not only not defining myself by what others see me as, but helping others detach from their labels and define who they are beneath the surface. And so what I've done since is I've created the legacy coaching. So it's mindful mental training.
What does that mean?
So it's using the principles of mindfulness, the whole idea of detaching from thought by defining your breath.
Sure. Tell me about that.
So with mindfulness, it's like, when you meditate, and I'm not a breathing expert by any means, but the whole idea is to become aware of your thoughts, not to label them as good or bad, and kind of let them come and go by constantly going back to your breath. So it's kind of like focusing on what you can control.
Sounds like yoga.
Yeah, very, very
and the power of Om. Yeah.
Yes. And so focusing on what you can control and letting what you can't kind of pass by.
Okay.
And so what I do is I believe it's detachment through definition. And so what I mean by definition is actually writing. So the practice of writing and seeing mindfulness on paper to me is very powerful. So when I had life coaches, when I was at Lululemon, we'd have these conversations about like, who are you? But then I'd leave even more confused because I was like, you get caught in this like, well, who am I? I'm going to try this on. I'm going to try that on. But what I realized was there was no clear definition. And I started to believe that, we are complete and whole the way we are. And so when we discover things about ourselves, we're just peeling back and seeing what's already there. It's not so much learning these new pieces of wisdom. It's just accessing what was already there the whole time. And so I started to come up with these exercises, and I have a very good mind as to how to, attune to someone's awareness, dump it all out, and then simplify, because I believe everything's connected. And like you were saying with all the loose connections, right? That's what I do. Yeah. Because I believe like who you are in one place is who you are everywhere. It just looks different. So my whole thing is if you create a bunch of circles, a bunch of labels of like who you are as a parent, as a brother, as a son, as a cousin, as an employee, who you are in those places all looks different. But there's one thing right in between all of them that connects to all of them. And that's who you are, not what you are.
How do you? But how do you access that?
So it's by attuning to basically what characteristics you display in each of those areas, and starting to see the commonalities between all of them. And it's different for everybody. Like everybody, gets there differently. But the process is just kind of, first of all, thinking about yourself. I think so often we get caught up in thinking about what others think of us.
Yeah.
And that's actually why legacy is upside down and flipped on my shirt, is I believe that I define my life and my legacy. Therefore, when I look down, I'm the only one that needs to read it.
But did you not create you saw yourself as a coach. You saw yourself as an athlete. You created that though. So does that, I struggle with this all the time. Yeah. Like I struggle with the idea that am I defined as a physician? People don't see me. They see Dr. Price. I see, actually, maybe they do see Ira. I don't know. But I see everything around me defined as, and this is going pretty deep, as I am a doctor. Without doctor, who am I? Right? What comes at that point in time? But I decided I was going to be the doctor. So does that not define who I am?
So it's not so much the I don't believe it's the title or the label. It's kind of like, it's like I would tell people, is like when they define themselves as like love. It's not like you're going to go up to people like, nice to meet you, I'm Love.
Although you do that.
Right? Yeah, actually.
I'm looking at this thing. It's free hugs giveaway. If you want to catch you somewhere in Hamilton, dude stands at a corner. It's a great way to pick up people.
You can find me at James and King once in a while. But the idea is...
Why do you do that, by the way?
For me, it's the best way to connect with a community and get a pulse of a community.
Really?
I love, like, my favorite thing about the sign of free hugs is those two words can break down so many barriers between
hugs.
Strangers.
Right.
And so I had, and even the last time I did it last week, and I did it by myself for a little bit, and then I had some friends come join me. But what was really interesting was the first time that 70% of the people that hugged me were men.
Really?
Which never happens. And the amount of those men that came up and were like, yo, I really needed this. Like, I really appreciate that.
Wow.
And it's, there's so much you can feel through a hug.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so important. And I'm not telling everybody needs to go out and give out free hugs.
No, but it's an emotion that we don't express ourselves well. Interesting.
It's very comforting too.
Totally.
Somebody hugs you, it's a very, very comforting feeling for both of you.
Totally.
For sure.
Yeah. And so going back to the characteristics.
I go off.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I do the exact same thing, so it's perfect. I can feel
flight of ideas.
Yeah. And so for me, it's about, just like we were talking about the thoughts that you can't control, your labels we can't control. It's like if I anchor myself in being a football player, that title can be taken away from me.
Right.
It was given to me and it can be taken away.
Very easily.
It's dictated by other people.
Right.
But the characteristics that exist within us, those are within our control. Not saying that I'm always Love. I definitely judge. I definitely, get stressed out, chaotic, whatever. But it's the idea of knowing that I have control over that. And so it's the constant practice of going external world, internal world. And so what I always tell people is like, it's everything should be defined by you.
So ability. So I'm gonna bring this to see a practical level, just for me and for whoever maybe is listening. We can bring it to the pain world, but I'm actually going to bring it back to myself because I do that shit. Damn it. Or I'll just talk about you as athlete, or talk about me as athlete. Yeah. Defining one as an athlete, you're saying that's external world. The ability of the athlete, so your ability is your characteristic of that. So your athletic ability, I'm good. Like, how would one break down athlete to external world? If your athlete is are you able to take away the athlete out of you? No, I think it's a mindset. The football player may be able to be taken away, but the athlete isn't going to go. I was an athlete. I mean, I still consider myself an athlete, even though I'm not competing anymore. Because is there an athlete mentality? But is it the ability then of the athlete? Is it which characteristics define that? Is what you're saying?
Yeah. So it's kind of like, I look at it like the it's not so much the label of the cereal box, but it's the ingredients that make up the label.
Okay.
So it's the ingredients that make up an athlete, because again, like, athlete can be taken away, but that doesn't mean all those ingredients were taken away.
So give me an example of those ingredients is what I'm trying to get at.
Collaboration, teamwork, communication, expressiveness, being dynamic, adaptable, those kind of things. Mm-hmm. It's going to look different on the football field as it does in the workplace or with your family or in a relationship.
Right.
But the idea is those can't be taken, that ability can't be taken away from you, but the label and the vehicle can.
Which is why if you take like a Navy SEAL out of being a Navy SEAL and you put them in an executive position, they're super successful. Yeah. Because the traits that they've learned, who they are, or the athlete, if you take an athlete out of that, you put them in another situation. I love athletes who become employees or employers or whomever, because they have that mentality. They're coachable, right? And it's those mentalities you're talking about. So how would I? Okay, go on. I'm listening.
So, and I have one story that describes what I believe in terms of an identity. So I believe that an identity is merely a vehicle to access love and validation. Okay, so and I'll tell you a story. So I coached my little cousin. She's 4 years old. I coached her soccer team, and it was their first time ever playing. And so I show up, and there's all these kids really excited to play, and we have a kid on the team picking daisies. We have a kid stopping in the middle of the game to hug a boy on the other team. And then we had
Wow.
a breakaway, kicked it 7 yards to the right of the net, and the goalie on the other team picked up the net and shifted it over so that we would score, right?
Wow.
So it's just like the purity of sport, you know,
Yeah.
like human beings loving human beings, like one of those things, right? But what I started to observe was parents and coaches were cheering loudest and most leading up to and after outcomes. Okay, so like when a kid would touch a ball and they were about to score, they would start to cheer louder. So what I started to pick up on was halfway through the game, kids were starting to get really upset that they weren't touching the ball or being able to kick it. So what I realized, I was like, wait a second, these kids don't care about kicking the ball. They care about being validated by their parents and coaches. So I realized that's where the athlete identity or any identity is formed. It's when you go, when I do blank, I will be validated. So these kids, you know, they start getting upset. They start crying off to the sideline. And I'm like, this is where the athlete identity is formed. You try to prove your worth through a vehicle, right? And what happens is you look at a professional athlete when you play sports
At a young age.
Yeah, exactly. At a young
Sounds
age.
like Gabor Mate talks about that stuff.
And what happens is you put on that jersey. What do you get? You get attention, recognition. You get validation. You get love.
Yeah.
It's all just love. That's all it is. So what happens when you fast forward 15 years, you're a professional athlete, you take off that jersey, you don't lose who you are. You lose the ability to access love and validation through how you knew, once you knew. And so what I do is I flip the script, and the whole idea with self-definition is you take the love that you want
External.
from everyone around you and you direct it towards yourself. Because I believe all the love and validation we seek from everyone around us is actually within our complete control from within. And so the constant practice of defining yourself and thinking about yourself it's all about the intention, and intention comes from the heart. So that's a practice of self-love. It's just to be with yourself. And so a big thing for me is it's so funny because when I speak to coaches, they're like, why the hell would I want my athletes talking about love? And it's like, well, the whole idea is, my belief is emptiness is seeking love and validation, whereas fulfillment is giving it directly to yourself. Okay. And I'm not saying that it's wrong to want love and validation from others, but the idea of going inside first and then attracting it from the outside, because that's fulfillment. But if I'm constantly reaching for a compliment from you, if I'm constantly reaching for acknowledgement from you, I'm living your life. I'm living on your terms.
For external validation.
You probably won't get it as well, right? The more you try to get it, the less you're getting it.
100%. 100%.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You know, that concept is spectacular. Actually opens my mind up quite a bit. The idea that the way we learn things as children, it carries on, but it's the way that we see our world. You actually nailed it in my mind. Was that kid touched the ball, the parents started cheering. That kid got a good grade, the parents started cheering. Yeah. The kids did X, everybody starts cheering. Take that X away, and what are you left with? Yeah. So how are we teaching our children? So I firmly believe, like I read a lot of Gabor Mate. I'm like, he's a psychiatrist, but world philosopher. Worked out of BC, actually lives in LA, I think now. Can't remember. He's wrote some amazing texts, and he talks a lot about addiction. In his one of his books, I can't remember, The Ghost Within, something like that. I can't remember. But he talks about all of our problems today with like an individual's issues with ADHD, depression, or all these things are manifestations of trauma that we've had from a lack of validation in certain ways from our parents when we were young.
Can I ask something? I've heard, because I have ADHD, as you know, I have heard that adoption or separation from a birth parent can be a cause. Have you heard anything about that?
Well, I mean, I think if we just apply the principles of what Gabor's saying, is it can be any sort of significant trauma.
Yeah. And
the problem is we focus on our manifestations of the problem instead of the root cause of the problem, which is what you're getting at. And I think that stuff just seems to make sense to me. God damn it, parents, you screwed me up. You made me a mess. So how do we unlearn these
Mom.
things that we've been so conditioned to know they're part of you? There's no way. I don't know how to get rid of them. How does one get rid of those?
So I don't think it's so much as much as getting rid of it as it is loving it and accepting it. And I believe that's how we break the loop, right? It's like a fear. Like, if I think of a fear that I had when I was a kid, I can't go back and change that moment, but I can reframe it with love, right? So I think of, there was a moment when I was younger where, like, this is a stupid one. I had a fear of public speaking, which is what I do now, coincidentally. But when I was 8, there was a talent show of 150 kids at this summer camp I went to. And when you're 8, 150 kids in a small room is a lot. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so I wasn't a part of the talent show by any means, but at the end, the guy goes, "Oh, the last person didn't show up. Does anyone out there want to share a talent?" And at the time, I was known for an ET voice. Remember ET?
I love ET. Who doesn't know ET?
Right? So all my friends were like, "Vince, you have to get up there. You have to get up there." And instead of getting up on stage, I actually broke down in tears. I'm an emotional guy, and ran out of the room crying. Right? And so since that moment, like, from when I was 8 until when I discovered that this is where it came from, anytime there was a speaker or a teacher would like point and look at me, I'd get that same trigger.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But
I
can't.
understand
That's PTSD. That's a little post-traumatic stress. Is how we would define that.
Okay, so no, that's great.
What's that, Al?
The same kind of. I used to skate on my ankles. My ankles were twisted. My mom tried to put me into hockey. Nobody wanted me to play. I skated off, boo-hoo-hoo, mommy took me home. That has always deterred me from skating, although I used to go roller skating a lot. But I never got into hockey. I never got into, going for a skate down Lake Ontario or anything because of that, I think. Is that make sense?
100%, yeah.
So what do you do? This is so you've defined a problem. We know that our childhoods, what do we call that?
Childhood?
Our childhood, no, but like plural. How do you plurify?
Adolescence.
No, adolescence is it's too late adolescence is too late to learn this stuff.
Puberty.
The trauma happens between 4 and 8. That I'm like thoroughly convinced. I mean, I specifically know when, this changing of schools for me in grade 2, 3, and then all the negative validation that I got woohoo, that was great. So if we recognize the problem happens at that, I find it super difficult, and I think we all find it difficult to break that mold. Acceptance is very difficult. Acceptance and that self-love and all these things you talk about, we all know this shit. I think most people understand that they need to do these things. But how do you tell? I'm talking to a chronic, and these are tough questions now.
For sure.
We have chronic pain patients, and we live we have mental health people that suffer from mental health, and whether these are because of traumas. And if we listen to Gabor, these are traumas that happened when they were children that they don't even know about or they can't even remember because the subconscious has thrown them away. We recognize all these things. How do you move forward from that? So, if we start, you're saying write it down on a piece of paper. I like that's where I'm trying to.
Yeah.
How do we put that into? I don't want to identify as a chronic pain sufferer. I don't want my patients to identify as chronic pain sufferers. I want to, because they receive validation from, it makes sense now. They receive a lot of validation from the world, but they should, or should they not? I don't know. I'm confused.
Yeah, no,
fuck.
I'm not saying like the answer is to write it down.
Right.
For me, it's constantly taking the thing that we're seeking and giving it inwards.
Okay.
And what I think of, the way I look at self-love is like past, present, future, right?
Right.
Three sections of time. Past is all about forgiveness. So it's not about waiting for someone else to forgive you. It's about forgiving yourself in those moments. Present is all about loving yourself right now. Future is all about trust. So, a simple exercise that I go through, that I take myself through, and I take a lot of my clients through is, I don't believe you can love yourself in the present until you forgive yourself for your past, and I don't believe you can trust yourself in the future until you do those.
Can you say that again for me?
So in the past,
it's like a therapy session for me.
In the past, it's forgiveness. The present moment, it's love, and in the future, it's trust.
I'm on my couch.
You can do 3 without doing 2 in 1, and you can't do 2 without 1.
Interesting.
So that's just my belief. Like, I
this is good. Yeah. It seems like you've got some education behind you to do these things.
So a big thing, like, and the reason why the practice of writing is so important to me is, again, its intention. So instead of seeking the validation from other people by telling them about, like, this is what I'm going through. Yeah, absolutely. I totally believe in expressing your truth and enrolling people in what you're going through. And I also believe that taking the time to give yourself that love and validation through writing is very important. Because I think with writing, it brings out feelings, it brings out truth. And my whole thing is we are what we want from others. Like, and what I want people to understand is beyond your trauma, beyond your beyond everything you're suffering from, you are love and you are light underneath all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And what I want people to understand, because what happens is when we get so caught up in the surface, we don't see beyond the surface.
Right.
And I had a friend of mine describe this to me, like, when we're born, we're these orbs of light and love. Right, so you're just like, think of a kid. They're fearless, and like
nothing,
flipping stuff, whatever. Yeah. It's just like they just.
I thought you were going to swear for a
second. No. Yeah. And what starts to happen is we start to form our subconscious, our ego, and it's a cloud.
Yeah.
And the whole idea is, in order to shine our light through the cloud, we first need to shine it on the cloud.
Right.
So it's about awareness. It's about acknowledging that we are using these labels to cover up what exists inside.
Right.
And so and that's why I think it's so important for us to go back to, like, tapping into the wisdom that we already know, and that is love. Mm-hmm. We all have the ability to love. We all seek love. So it's constantly, for me, it's a constant practice of directing that back to yourself. And I think that, writing yourself 3 letters. Number 1, I forgive you for.
Right.
Number 2, I love you because blank. And number 3, I trust that. And the best part is, it's not just a one-time.
What was number 3?
I trust that. Like, I trust that you will blank.
Oh, for the individual.
For you,
okay.
Yeah. And it's just speaking to you. Because the more we speak to others in those letters, the more we're giving them the power.
Okay.
And so, I think a great thing with self-love is, people are like, I don't know how to give the love that you're talking about. I don't know how to give it directly to myself.
Right.
And so what I do is write out exactly what it means to feel loved by, say, your partner or like your friend or whatever. And they write it out when they spend time with me, when they have a conversation with me, when they do something for me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. If you just replace they with me, that's your greatest opportunity for love.
Interesting. Yeah. How can we apply that? I mean, I love that. I actually think those are some really good points. How can I apply that to people that only see themselves as sufferers? When they physically suffer, they mentally suffer, and the validation they receive is through suffering, is through other people acknowledging their suffering. Mm-hmm. And how can one switch that into self-love? It makes it really, it's a super difficult task. And that's what we're challenged with here in our environment every single day. And so then people manifest it in different ways. They maybe go to McDonald's every day and they eat their because that's their self-love, is like all of the vices that we have make us feel better. So how do we flip that script? I mean, these things sound great. Like writing it down, like you write down, I am a pain sufferer, but I'm not going to accept it.
Because it's not about negating the truth. Like, if the truth is you do suffer, then you suffer.
Right.
It's not so much. It's not so much like, oh, everyth's rainbows and daisies.
Right.
And it's actually something I strongly believe in, is like, the reason why it's black and gold is because I believe there's beauty in the darkness.
Right.
And so it's finding the gifts within that, because I think our purpose in life is a direct reflection of the pain that we've endured. And so it's kind of like, what can we take from this moment and how can we help the world with what we've learned? And so it's turning it into contribution, not so much what's the word I'm looking for?
You can make a word up. Nobody cares.
Let's just end it at contribution.
Fuck it.
It's about turning it into contribution.
Right.
And so, and I'm not taking away the suffering. I'm not taking away any of that. But
it's a good point.
If it is about the validation that they're seeking from other people, it's like, what comfort do they get from others when they say, it's okay, everything's going to be fine? Because it's like, are you telling yourself it's okay, everything's going to be fine, or are you just waiting for someone else to say it? And so
we're usually waiting for other people to validate that it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
Because as much as we try to say it's going to be fine, I try to use like stoic thinking, where look at the worst case scenario. Is it that bad really at the end of the day, And so stoic thinking would say, what is the worst case scenario? It's survivable. Right. I guess at the end of the day, the worst case scenario is never that bad, but still, how do you move forward from it? It just seems so difficult. There's Susan Jeffers, who's like another philosophy person, another self-helpy person. She actually says something that and sort of like what you're saying, I kind of agree with it, is we spend so much time on the idea that we have to change, that we're looking for our passion. There's like this one thing that we have to do. We spend all this time focusing on giving up the negativity instead of learning how to walk beside it.
So, okay, I love that you said that, because I think that I speak to a lot of kids, and I do a lot of these workshops for our youth.
Yeah.
And what I've learned is kids are so caught up in, and not just kids, we all are, so caught up in everything needs to be happy all the time. What do you want in life? I want to be happy all the time.
Right.
But the truth is, it's always going to be up and down.
It's an ebb and flow.
How high and how low you go is up to you.
Interesting.
But the whole idea is the true inner peace that is possible in life is sitting right in between both, in between the ebbs and the flows, going, I won't let this define me.
Right.
Right? But it's not going like, well, I'm not going to ride that wave, because you're going to ride that wave. And I learned this the hard way. Like I lost my dad a year and a half ago to a heart attack. And it was sudden. And it was one of those things you start to learn, like I can be like, you know what, everything's fine, like everything's great. But deep down, I was suffering.
Right.
And I was really suffering and
ignoring it.
Ignoring it, absolutely. Because and for me, I need to get a grief counselor to help me, and it helped a ton, because you start to express these things and whatnot. But what I learned too was I was thinking about when I would zoom out on myself, when I would get the feelings of my dad, I would go on social media and aimlessly scroll. And so what I did was I wasn't connecting with my suffering. I was connecting with something outside of myself to deflect the suffering. So I wasn't accepting it. And so it's not like, I'm not saying that like sit in the pile of shit and just sit there forever.
Right. No, that was a good moment. That was a perfect moment.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is like sit in the shit. We'll throw another one in there. Got it. Okay. But trust that you're going to get out of it. But what I'm talking about is when you're in the darkness, what are you gathering so that when you get back to the light, you're like, look at these tools that look what I've gained. And I think of a swing. I always think of a swing. Okay. So with a swing, the more effort you put into going back, the more you're going to have a ride going forward. Right. I look at it like the darkness, as far as you go into the dark, is as much as you can appreciate the light.
My father used to say something very similar, and I think he learns it from his spiritual path. There's a saying in Hebrew or in like mystic thought is sometimes you got to go down to go up.
Yes.
And while you're down there, it's exactly what you're saying is. But I never thought about what you gain on the way down.
For sure.
You got to gain
your knowledge.
You got to gain
experience.
But but it's not just appreciating the dark. It's what are you gaining from being in that moment that can bring you up higher than you were before.
Yes. And I think to go a little deeper, I believe purpose is like a blood type. Okay. So only certain people can help certain people. Okay.
Interesting.
So certain people who go into the darkness, they really feel it and they're there and they acknowledge it. And it's like, this is suffering. Like I'm you know what? Like I'm going to gather this so I can help other people. Now you can take those gifts,
interesting,
and help others who are about to experience the same thing or are experiencing the same thing. And I'm not saying for those listening who are like,
it's not epigenetics, is it? Yeah. Is that epigenetics? That's not what that means. I can't remember. Anyway, yeah.
So I'm not saying like everything should be like fine and dandy. That's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm saying take whatever you can from the darkness and bring it to light. And when I say bring it to light, it's about contribution. It's about helping others, and because that's what we all long for, right? Is that connection with others and helping them. And you see it. I mean, we can go so deep with this, but like social media, it's like people are disconnected, right? there's no connection, there's no contribution. I'm
right. Yeah.
But we can do a lot better.
Interesting for a millennial to say that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so, but as human beings,
right.
I think it's so important, and that's why we're here, right? To help ourselves first, so that we can help other people. And a lot of people challenge me on self-love, where they go, "Yeah, okay, so you help yourself, but that's selfish."
Right. So I hear that often too. So, I've been in this position where for so long we've all done this. We've given so much of ourselves to somebody else, to everybody else. People, family, friends, community, patients, whatever, you name it. And at some point you're like, fuck it, I got to take care of me now. But I guess there has to be a happy medium, right? You can't just be all you, but if you're still working on yourself at any given time, to me it's like a Venn diagram. There's certain parts of it. You're always working on part of it, right? And so I guess we have to just keep on working on all the parts all the time. It's exhausting a little, no?
Yeah, I think
I swore.
My perspective, twice actually. So my perspective on this is, I think of the word selfless.
Yeah.
If you look at the word selfless and just as it is, it's less of self.
Right.
Okay. But if you are, it could be selfish, selfful, whatever word you want to come up with. But if you are selfish with the intention of being selfless, that's true self-love. Because it's not about loving yourself so it's like, screw you, I'm good, I'm happy the way I am. No, there's a human experience right in front of us that we need to take care of.
Okay.
But it's the intention of, I'm going to fill my cup so that I can pour out of it.
You can help others. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's all about intention, because, something I stand for is like, intention comes from the heart.
Okay.
Right? And so it's and that's why, when you talk about your patients, I would constantly ask why. Why? Because why comes from the heart. What and the how is in the head. And I'm not saying the head is wrong. I'm just saying that the heart never lies.
Understood.
So it's constantly taking whatever they bring up here and going in here. And so what I think of is, like those like gender reveal parties where there's balloons in a box that opens up. So if you think of
honestly, I can't stand
I know,
them.
but
they drive me fucking mad.
Just for the analogy.
Pop the damn balloon. God.
So I think of human beings.
I got 4 kids, yo.
Yeah. So I believe with human beings, we all have these like balloons of say love within us, right in our heart. And sometimes it takes some reconfiguring in the mind for all of that to be released out into the world.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important to go through the mind to the heart, but just also to know that the mind can also block off the heart.
Right, of course,
but
yes.
When you constantly ask why, you're digging deeper and deeper into the intention, which comes from here. So, anyone listening, I think that's the best way to listen to people is to constantly ask why. Think of kids, right? How many times do they go,
wow,
Daddy,
why?
Because they're living from here.
Right.
So it's
that's that's so important. And it's so important to answer those whys too.
For sure. Even if you don't know.
Right. For sure. I totally agree.
Yeah.
I usually just say because.
Yeah.
Why? Because.
Yeah.
Why? I just make shit up. They're not really paying any attention anyway.
Yeah.
Why? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's why. All right. Because you got to.
You just told all the listeners that, right?
What did I tell them? Because? Because. What I'm talking about, when a kid. Come on. Listen, Al.
I am listening.
I'm just kidding, kids.
Because.
No, I am just kidding. That was a joke. Al, thanks for pointing that out. Can we move on from that? So, are you saying, I believe that the mind controls the heart. Certainly, it has the ability to, but you can't, it's like saying you can control somebody's actions, but you can't control their thoughts. Should we be living from our heart?
You can only control yourself, right?
I'm not talking about other people. Well, not true, because we have a law that says there's no law that says don't think some way. It's a law that says otherwise we'd be living in that dystopian book that somebody wrote that I was supposed to read in high school. I don't remember. It's called 50 Shades of Grey or something. No, that's the wrong one. I'm just kidding.
Orwell's other novel.
Right. Orwell's other novel. No, I can't remember what it was called. Was that 1984? Yeah. So you can't control. Right. It was thought, something think, super think. I don't know.
Oh, I was wrong thing.
Wrong. Whatever it was called. I don't know. Okay. Whatever. Anyway, point. I don't even remember my damn point anymore. It got me off topic. That's original.
Thoughts.
That's a typical diagnosis of ADHD.
Thanks. No, I think what I was trying to say is we do have laws but no law tells you how to think. It just tells you how to act. So we recognize, potentially that thing. But so how do you live? How does one who's a sufferer, who suffers from depression, suffers from PTSD, where do they start? Suffers from chronic pain versus, what really I keep coming back to is where you said you're not defined by what you do. And by the label. Labels don't define who you are. But if you label yourself a chronic pain sufferer, well, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage.
For sure.
So what do? Break it down. How do you start? How does somebody start that? How does somebody start that process? Because right now, sorry, just to finish that, there's people that we all know that label themselves as chronic pain sufferers and then have pretty negative vices to deal with those things versus looking internally to help themselves get over those things. So where do they start and what would somebody do in that situation?
So the first thing I would say is the best question that I always think about is if you remove everything, what are you left with? It's like for an athlete, if you remove sport, what are you left with? If you remove, your
I don't know.
That's the thing. So it's constantly thinking about it. So it's it's the intention of thinking about, again, we're talking about below the surface. The second is I believe in this 4-step process where it's awareness, detachment, creation, implementation. And so awareness is awareness of the label. Okay. Do you want to keep it? Yes or no? Does it serve you? Yes or no? And if it's no, get rid of it. When you get rid of it, you got to create a new one. So if it's you're getting rid of your label of what you are, now you got to create a new one of who you are, right? So it's instead of saying I'm a football player, it's you know what? I'm a loving teammate. Okay. And then it's the implementation. It's the constant practice of that thing. Because too, it's so much comes along with that label. And I think of it even goes as deep as our names. For me, Vince, Vince, all Vince is Vince is a
byproduct. An Italian.
Is an Italian. But as a kid, it's oh Vince, you're the funny guy. Oh Vince,
right.
You're the you're inconsistent.
Yes.
Oh Vince, you're
it's all labels.
And so somebody goes, people who validate you go Vince, you're really funny, and I go, I'm funny, and then you kind of buy into whatever they do, right? Vince, you're inconsistent. I'm inconsistent. You become whatever those people who validate you believe of you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's stripping away all of that. And it's a lot easier said than done. Absolutely. But it's constant reflection, and it's the intention of focusing on you, not others. And I'm not saying don't listen to other people, don't talk to other people. But it's the idea of get yourself a journal and just start writing, and just start thinking about these things. Without blank, what am I left with? And if it's I don't know. Why don't you know? And just keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, again, it's all about intention. And I think, so much of in my times of depression, it's you get so caught up in how you're supposed to be that you forget about how you are.
Right.
Or who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think of suppression, right? And a big thing for me is expression. You're either expressing or you're suppressing.
Right.
And so for me, when I get down and I'm depressed, I keep everything in. And it just gets worse and worse and worse, and it bottles up in here.
Right.
For me, the best way to get out of that is through expression of truth. So if that's in a journal, if that's to my best friend, if that's my family, if that's on social media, hey, this is what I'm going through, which I don't absolutely love, but sometimes I express stuff about my dad.
Is it important to do it through social media? I think I'm actually not super against it. I think it's, in my mind, I think social media is like most things in the world. Sorry, the music, they start dancing next door at 4 o'clock.
We're going to start dancing after this.
Yeah, we could go down. Listen, I can do a mean pirouette.
Wow.
You should see that action. You should see that action. I could point my toes. Computer. I only break me. I'm a little clumsy. So, but I think that most things are a vessel. They're vessels. You can either use it for good or for bad. And they're neutral, I guess is the best way to put it. Most things are neutral. And if you use it towards something that's positive, then it's then it can be used, like, for example, you can watch TV and you can watch a charity event, or you can do what I normally do and watch like some kick-ass documentary or show or whatever. That's probably useless, not helping anything in the world. Or you can use it that way, right? Or you can sit on the couch and just be a sloth, or you can have people over and have a meditative sort of thing. So most things are neutral. But how important is it important to express? You see everybody expressing themselves. I'm one too. I've got a social media thing and I put all this stuff on there. Is it important to express yourself through social media? Is that important?
Yeah, I think there's levels to it, right? Like, because I express myself as well. Like, I expressed a lot of, truth and vulnerability. Like, I don't even like the word vulnerability. I like the word truth, because that's all vulnerability is. We've attached weakness to expressing truth.
Weird. Totally agree.
Right? Especially for men, I think it's so important for us to think about truth, because it's very hard to go, can you be vulnerable for a second? But if you go, can you just tell me what you're actually feeling?
Right.
You'd be like, yeah, I can tell you that.
Yeah,
And again, easier said than done, but it's accessing the truth, right? And so I think, again, it goes back to intention. Why are you posting it? So I always ask myself, like, am I posting this so that people validate me and, that Vince, he's always doing great things for, his free hugs and this and that. And it's like, or am I doing it because I want to make the world a better place with this message?
Right.
And so that's why I constantly ask, and I'm like, you know what? If it's not the latter, I don't want to do it. Because if I'm doing it just to get the validation, it seems empty to me, and I've been caught up in that. You post something, you're like, who's liking this?
I think we're all, at least I'm super guilty of that. Every hour for the first hour of a post is how many likes do I have? Who fucking cares how many likes I have, right? Do you do that?
I don't even have Facebook.
Oh, you don't have Facebook?
My girlfriend made my Facebook when we had to go on a trip, and I had to have a Facebook.
You're like the ginger Jesus.
Yeah, I never had Facebook. I have Instagram, but I post things that I want people to see. I don't care if you like it or not. I have no care whatsoever to affect me.
Right.
That's the way I am, and people say that I'm lucky because I think that way, but it's just the way I am.
Yeah, for sure. But how do you get through those times, those dark times that, most people who suffer have? I actually like that. Was it awareness, detachment, creation, implementation?
Yes.
In that order, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's excellent. I think we can implement something similar to that. That's actually a great idea for people who suffer just in general, to write it down. And the implementation, it's just so important to do that. And you teach that stuff.
I think the reason why, too, the whole thing of why and digging into why will help people realize why. Like, if you don't question yourself, you're never going to figure it out. If you just keep going along with it and saying, yeah, I suffer, but you don't question why, you'll never, ever figure it out.
Right.
The cool thing about the why as well is it takes people back to a moment where they made a conscious choice.
Mm-hmm.
So I had this instance where I was working with this basketball team, and the kid showed up late, and he apologized to the coach. He's like, sorry, I'm late. And he's like, okay, writes his name down, sits down.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of brought some attention to it. I said, like, there's no ownership there. There's no acceptance of the conscious decisions that were made that led to the outcome of being late.
Right.
But if you constantly go, why, and then you keep going back to the moment he made a conscious choice of, like, I woke up and I scrolled Instagram instead of getting my stuff on and leaving. There's no ownership. You're kind of protecting yourself.
We all do that.
From the truth. For sure. Absolutely.
I do that.
Yeah.
Wake up. Oh, let's see.
Yeah. But
bad.
But it's the idea of, and I keep thinking of levels, right? It's like sorry is just like protecting yourself in this little fortress.
Right.
Whereas why is like opening the doors and going, I woke up and I scrolled through Instagram and that's why I'm late.
Right.
And I think it's ownership is a massive thing, right? Because ownership, you're giving yourself power.
Extreme ownership.
But if you're like,
sounds
no,
like
it was
Aubrey
their
Marcus,
fault.
he says that stuff. Extreme ownership. That's
awesome.
his big. I love Aubrey Marcus. I listen to him all the time. He actually today, I just read one of his posts, which brings me to all this stuff. Was how long does it? Or at least the question was, how long does it take to learn a lesson? I don't know.
How long you want it to?
Right. So, like, how long? Like, if we realize these things, you just got to keep on drilling it in and using all those things that you're teaching. So, what kind of courses are you teaching now? Tell me about, like, we've got a couple minutes left here. I think a lot of people can get a lot of help. I'm getting help. Shit, this is like a therapy session. I swore, but it was a small swear, it was a mini swear. So
only 5 cents.
That was a 5. Yeah, that was a nickel.
So the where I'm at now is I run workshops, group workshops, and I have 84 modules that I've created.
Wow, 84.
So it's all based off of 12 core modules, starting with who are you, getting into stuff like what's my inner dialogue, what's my purpose, what are my fears, my legacy, vision, goals, et cetera, et cetera. But the whole idea is I have modules branching off all of those. And so I'm in the process right now. We're launching April 15th, a self-guided journey through my website where people can go on, and it's journal assistant. So you're there and you just kind of, I'm guiding you along on kind of like a presentation. And then I also have a 12-week program that I launch every 6 weeks. Right now we're about 3 weeks into our last one, and we go through the 12 core modules. But right now I'm kind of going into that realm of the online space to help as many people as I can, so that I can go out and work in schools and organizations and teams and stuff like that.
Who's your like ultimate target?
Honestly, kids.
Because that's where it starts.
And the crazy thing, and going back to what we were talking about too, what I've realized my job is to help kids embrace their wisdom and help adults tap into their inner child wisdom. Because it's like I said, it's all the stuff that already exists within us. And people, anybody that has gone through a session of mine, I don't tell them anything. I guide them to discover it for themselves. So I'm not like leading you to be like, you're love, or you're creative. Right. It's just like, I'll pry. I'll keep going deeper to the why, and then they'll start to see all those things come out. And so the whole idea is it's I believe in the term guided discovery. So it's you set the parameters for someone and you let them discover it for themselves. So it's not so much handing someone the keys as it is building the car and be like, this is the track.
Interesting. That sounds super amazing. I think most of us can use a lot of inner child healing. I think they're all broken. I think most of us brought up to, and there's no guide to go along with parenting. There's no guide to go along with most of the shit we do. We just sort of make it up as we go along. But I firmly believe that even if you think you had the perfect childhood, and whatever it was, as enlightened as your parents were, as non-enlightened it doesn't matter. There are moments of trauma that will stick with you forever that you talked about, that external validation, the kick the ball, did they clap afterwards? I mean, I think we still need those things, and we've become super soft as a culture, hence why people don't want to go outside in the non-existent storm, because we're going to preemptively strike the storm, so we're going to cancel school thanks to the school who canceled. Pick your kids up by 3:30 today, because if you don't, the storm, which hasn't hit, is going to kill you. Somehow we all survive the next day. It drives me fucking mad. Like school at this kid's school that my daughter goes to, I will not mention, but it's a wonderful, wonderful school. But out of how many days? 20 days of this month, I think like 10 of them have been canceled. Wow. Like at least 9, I don't know, because of weather. But honestly, like I went to school with no shoes.
Can you just tell me that you're Canadian?
Shit, I caught myself saying that. I'm gonna throw a bunch of these things in here. But we need a lot of that healing. I think everybody can use it, and I think a lot of our trauma starts from childhood. And people say, it doesn't really matter what school they go or who friends, school, family. Honestly, it comes to family. A lot of our connections, our attachments are to the wrong things. We're connected to social media because we didn't connect to the right things when we were younger, and we're connected to external validation because we missed that class when we were, when we were younger, or there was some specific moment of trauma, and in that moment, we were externally validated that felt really good, and that you never want to forget. And so all those things, like you sort of brought all these things up, which I think are super amazing to remember for us, and especially for people that are listening that are chronic pain sufferers and who do come to our clinics and who are out there just using cannabis to self-medicate for whatever reason. Using cannabis, and I'm going to bring this back in, first off, thank you so much. You were amazing. We can sit here for a long time and keep this discussion going. And truth is, next week we're going to bring on Naz to talk about her story as well. And we're working on a wellness, it's one thing to just prescribe people medicine, but it's another thing to change who you are and why you're medicating. Right? So no longer just think about when you're self-medicating, the I'm going to take this because it makes me feel better, because that we're just treating the manifestation of the cause. Let's get to the root cause of the why, like you said. Like, that's amazing. Why do I need to self-medicate? Why? Like the child says, why? Because they're thinking from their heart, right? Oh, genius. I love what you're saying here. It was just amazing. Thank you so much for being on today. Honestly, we learned a lot, and I want to keep this kind of thing going. So just a couple things as we Al, we want anything to say here before? I got a couple minutes left. I don't know.
I'm mesmerized.
Right. It's just amazing. Like, yeah, no, this is the stuff I think we need to hear, and I'm going to do a lot more of it. Let's just get into a couple things here about cannabis as we move on. So as we come to a close, I think, again, Tilray put this out. I think it's a really good addition to your it's my word. I made that up.
My armory?
Armory. Here, you want to talk? So it talks about the difference between medical cannabis and recreational cannabis.
So basically, it's just stating the differences between if you are a medical patient and a normal recreational user within Canada. So things like, if you're a medical patient, you can actually claim your receipts back on your income tax. Whereas if you're a recreational user, you cannot do that. And then things like, as a medical patient, you can possess up to 150 grams on your person, but as a recreational person, you can only carry up to 30 grams. Other things like product counseling. So when you go to any recreational store, say in BC, Alberta, or any of those now, because there's none in Ontario currently, they are not allowed to give you any advice on the strain or specifics about the cannabis. They're just allowed to sell it to you. But as a medical patient, you can consult your physicians, the people who work within their clinics, and things like that. When you're buying from a medical
Don't sound like you're too tired fucking talking here.
I'm running out of breath.
Oh.
So when it comes to quality control as well, when you're grabbing cannabis from a medical purpose, it means that you're grabbing it from a GMP certified facility, no matter what. When it comes to craft boutiques, there are less strenuous requirements for the cannabis. It can be sold to them from a third party as long as they test it before. So there can be discrepancies there. Also, when you're looking for mainly medical products like CBD products, where the recreational market has a lot of them available, but not as readily available as the medical market. They both have THC, but obviously the recreational market is more driven towards the THC high strains. So those would be easier to obtain recreational. And then it comes down to cost as well. Insurance companies are starting to get involved with medical cannabis now, as we know. So soon, medical cannabis will be covered by most insurance providers. Recreational cannabis never will be covered.
Good point. I'm gonna plug a couple of things here at the end. Do you want to plug stuff? I think you did. Do you want anything else to talk about?
I'll just say on Instagram, I'm at the Legacy Coaching and thelegacycoaching.com.
Okay. Website. I would totally check it out. I'm actually on there right now and looking at free hugs. I'm thinking I'm going to the next place he is, and we're just going to start hugging it out.
Yeah, amazing.
I love it. On the insurance,
hug.
Yeah, see, we're all. Come down to Gunjanistas.
Come down to Gunjanistas and hug me. I'm there tomorrow all day.
I thought it was Mondays. Okay, so
that's the market. I'm there on Thursdays.
Oh, okay. Oh, right. Tomorrow's
I'm there on Thursday, Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays. I do the 420 radio show from there.
I can't keep all these things in my head.
Yeah, you'll get there.
All right, a couple things to take in. So on the insurance or the coverage front, check out buywell.com, and you can it's like your natural health and wellness e-commerce site for all things health and wellness, but it's also got coverage for medical cannabis that's on there, and you could save up to 15% in Ontario, 20% in British Columbia. It's really cool. It's a great platform, and I'm totally into it, and I'm totally on it. And you'll see some of my stuff on there as well, and I think it's great. We should all do that. Also, this is really interesting. This is great news. SpinCo is opening up in Hamilton. Naz and myself have mostly Naz, who's an instructor. Spinco is like Soul Cycle, but like, I didn't say that. But well, it's just so like on crack. It's amazing. It's like way better to me. And so if you've heard of those things, it's a spin studio. It's Canada's largest sort of franchise when it comes to spinning, and it's like being in a club with music. You've gone to it. It's really
cool. It was amazing. I went to the one in Oakville, and it was very bougie. You were treated very, very well. The equipment was super clean. It was a very, very nice facility.
Yeah, it was awesome.
And I got halfway through it and was pretty much dead.
I love it. I go 3 times a week. It's amazing. It's a great workout. There's awesome people. It's a great team, and it's a great community. We're opening in Hamilton, probably around June time, so it'll open up in the summer. Check it out at Spinco Hamilton on Instagram and follow it. Be really cool. Also, you can follow my Instagram at Dr. Ira Price. And then you can listen to this podcast will be on 420radio.ca, but it'll also be on it'll be on the Higher Estate podcast that is on iTunes and SoundCloud. And eventually the video of it will be up on YouTube. And right now it's under Synergy Health TV, but we'll probably switch that up and do some other things. And thanks, Lucas, for doing all what you do. I'm really happy you're back, yo. Thanks.
Also, I'd like to, before we go.
Al, you're amazing, wonderful as usual. Really glad to be back next Wednesday 3 till 4:20. We are done. And
cool. I just got one thing to say. If you're having issues with opiates in Hamilton, we're doing a Hope on Thursday. Come on into the lounge and you'll get some information there.
Excellent. Yes. Perfect.
Yep.
See ya.
See ya.